Good afternoon, welcome to another A-Push video with Mr. Pate. Today we're going to be looking at review time. How effective were the progressives? Progressive era is a topic that comes up frequently on the essays. So here we go. How effective were these groups? Now, you could get a question that could say, how effective were the individual reformers? How effective were the presidents? How effective was this president compared to this president? We're just talking about the progressive movement in general. The whole progressive era, okay? It's not one movement. Shouldn't have said that. The whole era combined, what was this level of effectiveness? We'll try and break it down a little bit as we go through it. Here we go. Trusts. Trusts, of course, were like monopolistic major business forms. And you would say very effective if you were going to rate that. The trusts under Theodore Roosevelt, the first progressive president, he's going to say there are good trusts, there are bad trusts. And he's the first president to really break up any trusts. And you have new legislation, the Clayton Antitrust Act, that's going to allow that to happen. It was stronger than the Sherman Antitrust Act or the Interstate Commerce Act. So, it's going to allow trusts to be broken up. Taft, his successor, breaks up more trusts than Roosevelt does. And then Wilson is going to come in, and Wilson's idea is all trusts are bad. So he's going to just be out on a mission to break up all of them. So you would say, very successful cutting the trusts down to size. State and federal government. This is another one you'd probably say very effective. Why would you say that? Let's take state level. You've got Robert La Follette. You're going to have the initiative, which is like ballot measures, recall and referendum. Recall, of course, is you're recalling a politician. Arnold Schwarzenegger winning the governorship in California several years ago would be an example of recall. And then referendum is when the legislature kind of passes the buck and refers major ballot items, often tax measures, to the voters to let them decide to avoid getting blamed for what happens. That's typical maneuver that they use during bad economic times. We'll propose a tax increase, but we just pass it on to the voters, and then if you turn it down, well, blame yourselves. Okay, you also have federal level. You have the direct primary develop, especially for, and you have the direct election of senators that are going to come during this time, that through a constitutional amendment. The direct primary meant that the party machinery didn't just choose the nominee for each party. People actually could try and run on their own, and then whoever was nominated by the party would move on. That's what the primary is. The direct election of senators. Senators, all the way until the progressive era, had always been chosen by the state legislature. They were not chosen by the people. So this is increasing. Basically, now the people of America, of the United States, got to vote for the president, the representatives, and the senators. And with the direct primary, they had many more options and possibilities, and it wasn't quite as much machinery control. You would say very effective. Although it doesn't solve all problems, we still have some today. Industrial workplace, or maybe industry in general, we could say. Industrial workplace. So you're going to see major changes in terms of limitations on child labor and eliminating some child labor. You're going to see limitations on the workday for females. You're going to see more limitations on how long the workday can be for males as well. So you'd say, you also see, especially after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, you see a lot of efforts to improve workplace safety, to have emergency exits, to have better fire alarms or smoke alarms. You know, a variety of different safety options put in place to protect workers. And they're also going to start having some standards for safety in terms of how machinery is used, which makes it more safe in some other ways as well. Other things you could talk about in terms of industrial workplace, well, how about what industry produces? You're going to start to see during the progressive era, starting with the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act, you're going to see after Roosevelt reads Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, one of those books you just want to know for the AP test. He is going to, basically, Roosevelt is going to roll up his sleeves and say we need some consumer protections out there, and you know, we need standards for what industry produces in terms of meats. We need standardized labeling and ingredient lists and things of that nature to try and protect consumers. So maybe that deserves to be a separate category, be consumer protection, but I'm just going to label, you just lop it in with this. In urban living conditions, so you have the settlement house movement and you have scientific management in business, and you have just this interest in science. Some of the settlement house people, they were like analyzing the waste disposal, the waste that was laying around, how dirty, how disease-ridden things were. They start to study this, and progressives attack problems thinking there's a scientific way to solve them. Urban living conditions, they're going to clean up, they're going to start to get their voice heard, reformers in cities, to try and improve waste removal, to improve cleanliness in general, to teach people things to keep them kind of safe. They're going to have better standards for housing, and zoning really starts to emerge as something to plan out how people are going to live. And maybe we shouldn't jam them all in these tenement houses, these awful tenement situations. We need to have something that would be a better choice for them. Now, that does not mean it's an overnight success. Certainly you could say it was very effective with industrial workplace. I think this is a mixed bag. You have a lot of people living in terrible conditions of poverty still, but at least some people are identifying the problem and starting to move toward it. I would say it's partially effective. The last area is conservation, and I would say very effective. Now, if you measured it in terms of today, you would say it's not very effective at all. There are all kinds of things they didn't address in terms of the environment, but back then, no presidents really had gotten involved in conservation, and Roosevelt was a avid, ardent outdoorsman, and he's going to push really hard to say, let's set aside federal lands to get conserved. And part of the rift that develops between Roosevelt and Taft is around the Pinchot-Ballinger affair, where Roosevelt feels like Taft is not working to set aside quite as much land, and even revoking a little bit of that land. Wilson will set aside even more. This is really kind of before the era of Clean Air Acts and more Clean Water Acts, and kind of more studying has to happen. But an awareness is rising, so I'd say very effective for the time. So overall, you could say the progressive era did not achieve everything, but it certainly was very effective in several of these areas, and overall was a fairly effective time period. That's all the time we have for today. Stay classy, Samurai.